A lone woman, walking the coal-stone corridors of Tudor power. No crown on her head, no army at her back, only her voice, her belief, and the quiet knowledge that speaking her truth might cost her life. Her name was Anne Askew. To the crown she was a problem, to the church a heretic, to history she became something more, an unshakable symbol of what it means to suffer for conviction. She was born in 1521, the daughter of Sir William Askew, a landowner loyal to king and country. Like most daughters of privilege, she could have faded quietly into domestic life. But Anne was different. She read, she questioned, she challenged. In Tudor England, that was dangerous. For a woman to be educated was already rare. But Anne turned education into rebellion. And in a land where religion and politics were woven into a single iron cage, her beliefs were not just spiritual, they were treason. Anne Askew embraced Protestantism, but more specifically, she rejected transubstantiation, the Catholic teaching that during Mass, the bread and wine literally became the body and blood of Christ. According to the 1539 Act of 6 Articles, questioning this doctrine wasn't just controversial, it was a capital crime. Anne didn't whisper her disagreement in private, she declared it. I would rather read 5 lines in the Bible than hear 5 masses in church. It wasn't arrogance, it was certainty. And in a kingdom ruled by fear, certainty was deadly. By 1545, Anne's words were not just devout, they were contagious. She preached publicly in London. She spoke clearly, rationally, and with passion. And the people listened. That was her real crime. She drew the eyes of powerful men, Bishop Stephen Gardiner and Chancellor Thomas Wriothesley. To them, Anne wasn't just a misguided woman. She was a threat to their delicate political order. King Henry VIII had broken from Rome, yes, but his church was not Protestant. It was a compromise, a fragile one. Anne Askew in her defiance threatened to blow it apart. More troubling whispers in court tied her to Queen Catherine Parr, a woman with her own Protestant leanings. Anne was arrested, interrogated, released once. But in a land of secrets, second chances were illusions. They came for her again. This time they didn't want answers. They wanted names. Anne was taken to the Tower of London, a place where voices disappeared, but hers would echo through time. She refused to confess, refused to betray anyone, not even under threat. That defiance drove her interrogators mad. And so they did something unprecedented. Chancellor Wriothesley and Sir Richard Rich themselves turned the wheel. The rack, a device so cruel it was rarely used, especially on women, stretched Anne's body until her joints tore apart. They did put me on the rack because I confessed no ladies or gentlewomen to be of my opinion, she later wrote. It wasn't just torture. It was an attempted annihilation of her spirit, her body, her silence. Her arms and legs were destroyed. She would never walk again. And still she gave them nothing. The crown wanted her to point fingers. She looked them in the eye and said no. She was carried back to her cell, mangled, bleeding, and barely alive. But they hadn't broken her. Anne Askew became more than a heretic. She became a living indictment of the regime. I had rather to die, she wrote, than to break my faith. No confession, no surrender, only pain and purity. Her captors believed the rack would crush her into obedience. Instead, it transformed her into a martyr. When she could no longer be tortured, there was only one path left: public execution. July 16, 1546. Smithfield, London, a place soaked in the blood of heretics. Anne could not stand. She had to be carried to the stake in a chair. A special support was built just to hold her shattered body upright so the crowd could see. But she sat with dignity. She would burn, but she would not beg. 3 other men, John Lascelles, John Hadlam, and John Hemley, stood condemned with her that day. But it was Anne that the people came to see. Not out of morbid curiosity, but because they'd already heard the stories, the woman who survived the rack. The woman who never spoke a name. The woman who stood up to kings and didn't flinch. A bishop was sent to preach to her at the stake, Nicholas Shaxton, a former Protestant who had returned to Catholicism. Anne ignored him. Her lips never moved. That silence was her final sermon. Executioners tied a bag of gunpowder around her neck to hasten the end. The wood was stacked dry and thick. The flames were hungry. The crowd gathered not in bloodlust, but in disbelief. When the fire rose, Anne Askew never screamed. She simply disappeared into legend. Anne's story didn't end in smoke. Her writings, the examinations of Anne Askew, were smuggled out, printed, and circulated by reformers. John Bale preserved her words. John Fox enshrined her in acts and monuments, calling her a virgin pure in the faith of Christ. The state tried to bury her truth in ash, but they couldn't, because you can kill a body, but not a soul. Anne Askew's death wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a spotlight on the brutality of power, on the price of belief, on what it means to choose conviction over comfort. She didn't want to be a martyr. She wanted to be heard. She was stretched, burned, erased. But today you are hearing her. Her agony revealed everything the regime tried to hide, that faith cannot be forced, that silence can roar, that a woman with nothing can still change history. And so we ask, what would you die for? Would you speak when silence is safer? Would you stand when you know the fire is waiting? Anne Askew did. I would rather to die than to break my faith. And in doing so, she lit a flame no tyrant could ever extinguish. Integrity is not a virtue that makes life easier. It makes life harder, but more meaningful. In Anne's time, integrity got you tortured. Today, it might get you mocked, dismissed, unfollowed. But it will also earn you the one thing no system, no regime, no mob can ever take: self-respect. Anne Askew died with her body broken, but her self intact. That's the definition of strength. That's the power of quiet defiance. And perhaps that's why her story was written down, preserved, and remembered centuries after kings and bishops who condemned her turned to dust. Her bones burned, but her words lived, and they whisper still, I would rather to die than to break my faith. We all leave behind something, a story, a sentence, a choice. What will they say about us when the fires die out and the smoke clears? That we went along, kept quiet, looked away, or that we stood? Anne didn't intend to be remembered. She just refused to forget who she was. That's what gave her voice power. And that power didn't come from privilege or protection or popularity. It came from something simple, something eternal: conviction. Anne Askew's flame still burns, not on a stake, but in every classroom where a student asks why, in every courtroom where justice is defended without fear, in every quiet corner where someone says no and means it. Maybe you're not asked to die for your beliefs, but maybe you're asked to live for them, to speak when it's uncomfortable, to act when it's unpopular, to stand when you feel alone. And if you do that, if you choose conviction over convenience, then Anne Askew's story isn't just history, it's your future. In the end, Anne's story is not about martyrdom. It's about meaning. It's not about dying bravely. It's about living honestly. We live in a world where the truth is often blurred, where justice bends under pressure, and where silence is rewarded more than integrity. But if Anne could stand her ground with her body torn, her future gone, and her fate sealed, then surely we too can stand, even if just a little stronger, a little braver. Because history doesn't remember the ones who stayed safe. It remembers the ones who stayed true. And Anne Askew was true until the end. So now it's your turn. What do you believe in? And what will you do when that belief is tested? When your moment comes, will you bend, or will you burn bright like Anne? They broke her body, but her truth walked free.